So for this section on Teotihuacan, I'm going to launch into a workshop, a kind of a conversation about color with respect to the paintings that are extant that exist right now in Teotihuacan. So I'm going to bring up terms like this is an introductory to art history um, lecture series, and we're talking about Mesoamerica right now, and we're going to be talking about Mexican art throughout these talks. And the art historical element, we're learning new terms and new ways to look at things, and kind of sharpening our art historical senses, a lot of which are retinal and haptic afterwards, right? Or maybe before. Um, I'm not sure what the sequence is of haptic and retinal, but that's another conversation. So I'm going to stay focused here. So we have on the left, I'm showing kind of the classic, if you try to find out on your own how hue, value, and saturation work, these three color parts of color. If you tried to find out how to do that on the internet, that's the kind of image that you would see. So we have hue, which is like, okay, I want a green car or a yellow car, that's hue. And then if you want a dark red car, then we're bringing in value, but value is hinged with saturation, right? So it's linked. When it gets darker, you're going to lose some of your saturation. It's going to desaturate a little bit. You're going to suck some of the brightness of the chroma out of your color. So we're going to talk about that with respect to the Teotihuacan painting, and then within that we're going to talk about using a muted palette or a monochromatic. So we're going to use a term like monochromatic, and we're going to talk about like when a painting is made up of a tight color range, right? So red could go towards orange with yellow, or it could go towards purple with adding blue. Is that right? Or it could go in many directions. And what we're saying is what happens when you keep it within this red world. And so on the right, you can see the desaturation event here. The red is it's getting darker. And there's some research by a postdoctoral researcher in San Diego who I took this image from, and he has some work on. There's a particular effect that happens to our eyes as it gets darker. We see less reds, and so this is his picture showing that effect, and he thinks Teotihuacan operates in that way. So on the right here, you also have, just to really quickly, this is like a monochromatic image, except for the green background. So these plants are represented. This is a wonderful painter named Richard Ryan, a contemporary painter, and then on the left here, this is a monochromatic rug by a woman named Josefina in Oaxaca that plays with the intensity idea. This is Morandi from the 60s in Italy, a small painting that we'll talk about the color of that. And then I have some ideas about the history of mural painting in general, and the Roman paintings in Pompeii, and the cave paintings in Lascaux. And then we'll also talk about the idea of facsimiles or reproductions and copies, and how to deal with that in terms of color and what that even means. So that's just a quick reference slide to get into it, and then I'll go through the paintings. So this is my map of the paintings of Teotihuacan, and these are these sites, right? If you watch the introductory video, we have the main three sites here: the pyramids, and then the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, and we have this Avenue of the Dead, and we have these apartment compounds / palaces. And so this details where the paintings are located. So if you're ever taking a trip or anything, you can just steal this, and it helps because it's quite complicated to figure out where the paintings are on site. It takes some time to figure out. So we'll just kind of go through these by site. It's kind of fun to do it that way. So in the top right and the bottom left, actually all these paintings are from Tepantitla. And we have the bottom right, we have like a dignitary doing some kind of offering. And yeah, maybe I won't talk too much, as I'll just kind of show you what these paintings look like. Get a sense. We're still in the compound of Tepantitla here. Now we're in Tetitla. Atatelco. This is a really cool place. There's two buildings. One has white on red and one has red on white on the murals, kind of reversal. And these are the netted jaguar figures in the bottom here that are represented here. So this is a close-up of this wall. That's from Zakwala. Okay, so now that I've shown a couple images, let's break down color and hue and saturation a little bit more. So as we add a dark color, the red loses its brightness, right? So we add a medium color, it loses its brightness also. So the idea is that these three, like if you look at them on top of each other, maybe have the same similar what? There's something similar about those three. These three are you could use the word intensity also. So saturation and intensity go hand in hand. So these have more intensity in color. These you could say they're grayed down by an amount. This is lighter than this, and it's lighter than this. Like here's a good question: does this have more color intensity than this, or is it the same? Right? What has white done to red, and what has the darkness done to the red? So I'm just kind of playing with talking about color. So how would you describe the color in these two paintings? Maybe before we get to that, I'll show another slide just to help. So here's another grid of reds. I think this is like, if you look up Pompeii red, this is what you get. So we're going to talk about the Roman paintings that have the classic red wall. And here again is this Burkinhe effect, which I don't know much about, but basically just looks like the color is desaturating, but maybe something is happening different to the reds than to the greens, according to this effect. So this is a monochromatic palette. I'm just kind of using the terms conversationally so we can get comfortable with it. Here you have the flower and the beach scene and the rainbow are slowly being desaturated as we go from right to left. Right, so the chroma is more intense. The red here is more intense, and the green. And as it, like the filters on your phone when you mess with photographs. So you can separate value and intensity from color, but really everything is together, is interacted with, right? It's relational. So if we go back and let's look at this painting again, these two paintings from Teotihuacan, this is a close-up on the right, and this is actually a close-up also. This pattern is kind of repeated in the corner of a room. Yeah, so on the right, I'd say we have a monochromatic, and we have this red field that is both flat and infinite at the same time. And we have these figures in that space that are very simply described with slight shifts within a red palette, right? And then over here we have greens and reds that, if you look between this green and this red, what do you see? It's a slightly lighter value than the red, but not by much, right? And so what we're dealing with, if I take another image here, again, like these are contemporary photos of these works. These are professional photographs that you see of what they look like. These aren't dimly lit pictures taken in the middle of the night somewhere. These are, this is a fragment that's in a museum somewhere. So they're still hard to see. And that's part of how they operate. And it's due to the way the color is functioning. And so this yellow looks bright in this painting. It has an intensity of color compared to, right? There's more color there than anywhere else, it seems like. And but if you put that yellow in any other painting, it would not seem intense, right? This is just the conversation that has been has like a low hum to it in this painting. And so I'm trying to talk about that a little bit. And so like the painting on the right, one of the effects of bringing the value and color close is that they have a slow read, and it takes some time to appreciate and understand what's happening in these paintings. There's some research that suggests that they're made for crepuscular viewing, right? So like at dusk or dawn, like what would these look like compared to during the daytime? We're talking about a civilization 2,000 years ago with natural light, and how would these appear? They would have some mica and hematite, I think is how you say it, would be in there glittering. So they would have that feel. I'll show a couple more images. So here you have an object made, or a monster type thing described with just two colors, right? You have the ground and the object, and you have this play where the ground can kind of come into the object and play with it. So you have the background, so the object's almost see-through. Here you have another monochromatic that's just made up of 4 or 3 colors, and this is the photo we already saw. So we're learning to talk about these in terms of monochromatic and type, value, and color. Another good example. So this is Joseph Albers talking about interactive color. So these two are the same color, but they appear different due to what's around them. And the same with this green and this green. So we have a situation where everything is relational. And that's something I want to drive home with this talk, is that color is it's fickle, right? It's known as as precarious, as mercurial, as there's been this long debate art historically about line and color and what can you count on and what has a lasting, ground to it. What is solid, and color is often thought of as this kind of difficult thing, right? Or you could talk about it that way, as a kind of emotional landscape. So this slide, and Joseph Albers' work in general, he likes to talk about it as the most variable, I think is how he talks about it, part of making artwork in general. So if we come back to this, so what I'm saying is that this yellow only behaves the way it does because of what's around it. And that's a really important art historical thing to pay attention to. So that's what's happening. And so here again, we can see the ground is coming through, and this warm color is not that different from this red here, which is kind of part of this costume in front. We can see this shape repeated again, this yellow triangle red shape here. So I just want to keep going through these a little bit. So this is an example here of, sorry, the slide on the left is tilted a little bit, it should be straight up and down. So this was in my original slide. We have this is a monochromatic red, and you end up with this very subtle, slow read that feels like maybe dusk or dawn. And the green is within that tightness, right, of value and intensity. Maybe it registers on a similar intensity to some of the moments in this tablecloth, but it is of a different chroma. I'm just trying to help us talk about it in that way. And then on the bottom right, we have, this is all the same red. We don't vary from it chromatically very much, right? We're not getting too much more into orange, or it's very tight within red. And we're just operating within this light and dark of red. And the intensity is also quite high. Like it doesn't get drained or desaturated in the light values in the same way as it gets desaturated in the dark values. So again, I'm just helping us walk through how to talk about color in images. Here we have the idea that I'm trying to get into here, which is the yellow triangles in the painting from Teotihuacan. I'll show again, like on the right side here, act as an intensity moment, as a thread of intensity in the overall color matrix of the image. And this happens with this rug made by Josefina in Oaxaca as well, right? So we have this monochromatic field, and then these moments of intensity in these yellow, more intense. So we have like a subdued field that's punctuated. And an example of that, just like a classic kind of internet picture where people are selling posters, they'll often desaturate the room and show the image as a color moment. So this is just to help you remember, or like kind of see where you see this happen a lot, and as like an effect, as a filter. So we have Matisse's red painting there, and then the rest of the room has been kind of desaturated. And so just to stay on this thread of a intensity color moment acting as a kind of adding dynamism, maybe like the dynamics of doing something like that. And there's a lot of Western art history examples of that. So I'm going to show some of those. So for example, if we look at Morandi's paintings, the amazing painter from the 60s in Italy, in Bologna, Italy, we have this wonderful thing that happens. So part of what happens is when you limit the palette and you limit the value, and the hues aren't necessarily limited here, but you do have like a subdued tertiary, you could say, right? Because in the color wheel, you have the primary, secondary, tertiary way of laying out colors. So what I'm trying to say is what happens when you collapse that space, when you collapse the high to low that's available to us, right? Like if you think about a flute player playing dynamics in an orchestra, and it goes from a very subtle light whisper to a very loud, strong sound. So color and value can offer that dexterity, open up that far. You could take the accordion and expand what's available, or you can think of it as like compressing and collapsing what's available to use. So with Morandi, he's collapsed. We're looking for air. There's that feeling too. You're kind of suffocated, and there is. I don't feel suffocated when I look at Teotihuacan paintings, but there is like you're squinting to see. Like you can't separate what you're looking at, right? Or it's difficult, or it takes time because the red is very close to the green. I'll show another image of a Teotihuacan painting. So even though the lines are quite thick, because of the shared intensity and value, it's a slow read. It takes a while to see what's happening in here. It's subdued. In these paintings, you have a quicker read, and these operate and are beautiful in the way that the background. Again, here you have the background coming inside of all of this body. So it appears that the thing is made up of small parts, like in space. And you can imagine, like, if you ever seen people in outer space in the International Space Station brushing their teeth or something, and they're floating, all the food is floating in space, and there's kind of lack of gravity. This is like a technique in a formal language of using the background. The background can come inside of all the parts. So if we continue on with Morandi, so we take this and we can see like this acts as background and foreground. This can act as background and foreground. There's a subtlety, there's a buckling of what identifies with object and background. Even though the shadow is well delineated, we feel like there's a light touch to where things are that they could shift, maybe, or shimmer, or something like this. So with some of his paintings, like I think these are earlier paintings, like he allows himself maybe to like give a little punch or intensity to the color. So this blue is intense compared to all the muted colors. It's got more intensity, more chroma, and that adds to the song, to the dynamics of the arrangement of the piece. And so you could read these paintings, these kind of quiet, calm paintings, as dances with value and color in this way. This is like a way to formally read what they are. Is this the bare canvas? Is this the background of the thing that is painted, or is this white paint on top of it? You can see this vase pushing up against the side of a bottle, and you can't. There's a moment where it comes in front or pushes on or behind, and we start to have that whole game, which I don't want to go into much. I'm more interested right now, for Teotihuacan's sake, of talking about the background comes into the foreground. It's kind of play between form and space. So if we look at Teotihuacan again, after that conversation, how do we view this? So just to show another example from art history, like if we take the Roman paintings from Pompeii, which are fresco style, we have a red background, but we have no opportunity for the red to infiltrate. These are very cut out. And then the form is modeled based on a language or technology of value, right? The bottom of the arm is darker than the top of the arm. And some light source is depicted based on value. The color is not the defining character of the form. And what Teotihuacan touches on is the idea, and so in here, the value is creating the form. Color is not creating form in these works. But when we get into something like this, we're starting to play a subtle game where the intensity of the color engages with the lightness to give something form. And that's important to recognize with a visual sensitivity. So when we get to someone like Vuillard and Bonnard and these colorists, we're starting to deal with like, this is brighter in color and in value. Maybe there's some other moments here that have more intense, rich color, but to play with putting a brightness and intensity outside the window, right, which makes logical sense, but in painting language, to have the back come forward like that, and to have these objects kind of dissipate or be enveloped in their tertiary hues is interesting. And in here we have a refusal to use value to make form. Right? They end up being flat in a way, and we're using color to talk about space. And Matisse and Duran, this is classic, where the value has been pushed to speak color. And you could talk about it that way. You're pushing value to talk about color. It's giving it an accent, right? There's a phrase in southern France that your accent is thick enough to hang on a door hook. So the accent of value is thick enough in color to speak of form. So I'm just trying to talk through these paintings in terms of monochromatic and tight hue and intensity color landscape, and help sharpen our skills in terms of how we see them. I'll show another Another Teotihuacan painting. So this is different. This doesn't talk about it in the same way as the other paintings I've shown, but it's still engaging. Yellow is not that far from red, so we're in a, well, it is, but like we're engaging a red field at least, and talking about this monochromatic idea. Here's a subtle example of, like his entire cutout almost is paid. Now here's a situation where he's pasted onto a red field. So this is a different technology. It's more similar to the Pompeii. But we still have, it's still such a tight value system. And there isn't much desire to use value to shade a volume. Maybe we could talk about it that way. We're not seeing, here's another picture where we can see better. There is more color. So that's part of what I want to talk about with all this is reproductions matter. But does this color help? Or does it obfuscate? And maybe that's useful to look at for a second. Like when we saw it with less color, was it easier to see? And what does easier to see even mean? I'll show some other painting. This is a photo that's been doctored to help see more of the color, or not more of the color, but just some of the shifts in color. So here's a less obviously doctored image of this painting fragment. So here we can see the background coming inside, right? So there's a buckling or a fluidity between background, and so the contours are made up of the background. The contours, so this decoration here is the same color as the background. So you could just say, oh, that's an effect of painting on a wall, but to be able to visualize and leave out the background, or is it painted on afterwards, or how are these constructed versus how are they visualized during the painting process? If that makes sense. Here's a classically monochromatic image, right? So how many colors, how many shades of red is this made out of? I find this just be so subtle. This lightness of blue and green to this red. Now you could decide that it's faded, and then that would kind of take apart my whole argument, right? But at the same time, it's still worth it to talk about it as if this is the way that they were, because it's what we have to look at right now, and it helps us talk about color. So lastly, I guess within the color topic, I wanted to bring up the idea of reproduction, and that's exactly what I'm talking about right now. So do we look at them as if this is how they exist, or do we try to imagine what they looked like? Lastly, I guess I can show this. So Seurat on the left, you have a classic kind of value shade difference. Going from dark to light, that's charcoal on paper. On right, you have Van Gogh, and this isn't the greatest example, but it does the job where he's not using value how you would maybe normally think of it to represent volume. It's the intensity of the color that is doing the job. And if you're not seeing this at first, that's okay. Like it takes time maybe to see this. Here's a Matisse example of a red wall becoming a red table. And he maybe wasn't brave enough, or like what's the desire to make that line between the table and the wall? Here's another example by Matisse of a red field. It's not giving us much hope of knowing where we stand in a way, right? When the floor is the same color as the wall, when it's an intense red, it's kind of dismantling the space. And here's Teotihuacan again. So just to recap, we went over the ways in which these paintings speak monochromatic, and the ways in which they talk about value and color. And we kind of looked at these different, we were able to see some different styles from some different locations at the same time, and kind of get a sense of the spread of how these paintings were made. And we also talked about desaturation and the interaction of color. And these are all really crucial. And we talked about background becoming foreground. And these are all really crucial art historical ways of looking, methods of looking at things. And we touched on reproduction and the qualities that reproduction has.